So I don't know if anyone out there has heard, but that OCG list is out. What's up YouTube, this is GalacticGod, and I'm coming at you today with a video to give my opinions on the new OCG BanList and their take on Arata-ing just about every old school card you can think of. So for those of you guys who don't know yet, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Sinister Serpent, Temple of the Kings, Harpy's Feather Duster, Exchange of Spirit, Ring of Destruction, and Crush Card Virus are now coming off of the Forbidden List over in the OCG. Now for those of you guys scratching your heads wondering how is this even possible? Well, Konami has done something both kind of incredible and unthinkable all at the same time. They've errata'd those cards. They've changed their effects, not entirely, but just enough to kind of neuter them down. Chaos Emperor Dragon now has an effect that states it cannot be normal summon or set. It must be special summoned from your hand by banishing one light and one dark monster from your graveyard, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. During the turn you activate this card's effect, you cannot activate other card effects. Now once per turn, you can pay 1000 life points, send all cards on the field and in both players' hands to the graveyard to inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each of your opponent's cards sent by this effect. So lots of changes to Chaos Emperor Dragon. For Ring of Destruction, it now states you can only activate one Ring of Destruction per turn. During your opponent's turn, target one face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is lower than or equal to your opponent's life points. Destroy that face-up monster, and if you do, take damage equal to that monster's original attack. Then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took. Now a couple of quick notes on the changes made to this card. Number one, you can only activate it on your opponent's turn now, and you can only destroy one of your opponent's monsters, so you can't attack with your own monsters and then ring it for game. Also, you can't actually ring it for game because the monster that you're destroying has to have a lower attack than your opponent's life points. Plus, now it looks like you have to take the damage first before your opponent. So you can't even make the game a draw by playing Ring of Destruction. So if both of your guys' life points are low, you're going to take the damage first, meaning that if you're still alive, then your opponent takes the damage. Interesting changes. For Crush Card Virus, it now states, tribute one dark monster you control with 1000 or less attack, check your opponent's hand and all monsters they control, and destroy all monsters with 1500 attack or more. Then, your opponent can destroy up to 3 monsters with 1500 attack or more from their deck. After you activate this card, all damage your opponent takes until the end of the turn becomes 0. So perhaps the biggest change to this card is the fact that they don't get this effect for the next 3 turns. They just get it instantly right when it happens. Temple of the Kings now states you can only use each effect of Temple of the Kings once per turn. Number 1, you can activate one trap card you control during the turn you set it. Number 2, you can send both this card and one face-up Mythical Beast Scarret to the graveyard to special summon one monster from your hand deck or one fusion monster from your extra deck. So lots of changes made to that card as well. For Exchange of the Spirit, it now states you can only activate one Exchange of the Spirit per duel. If each player has 15 or more cards in their graveyard, pay 1000 life points, both players swap their decks with their graveyards and then shuffle the decks. Definitely looks like they're trying to prevent that OTK from happening. Now Sinister Serpent now states you can only use the effect of Sinister Serpent once per turn. During your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. During your opponent's next end phase, banish Sinister Serpent from your graveyard. This change is a pretty harsh one in my opinion to Sinister Serpent, as I almost believed he can come off the list just the way he was. Now ever since it was announced that Konami was gonna errata some of the old Yu-Gi-Oh cards, most notably Dark Strike Fighter, I've had it in the back of my mind that it might be interesting for Konami to go ahead and do this with a lot of the cards that just seem too broken to ever see play again. Now I've heard a lot of people talking about whether or not they like or don't like the fact that Konami is changing the original effects of a lot of the different cards. Now the biggest argument I've seen opposing this is that if you really wanted to make a watered down version of the original card, instead of altering the original card's effect, why not just reproduce a new card with a more balanced effect? But for myself personally, I'm not really totally against this. Now I do understand the argument that now these original effects will no longer be within the game. Even in traditional play, The original card effects would no longer be able to be used. Now this also runs the risk of setting a pretty dangerous precedent within our game. Konami could basically do away with the forbidden/limited list altogether. If a card is just too good, instead of placing it on the forbidden list or limiting it to 1 or 2 copies per deck, they can just change the effect entirely whenever they feel like it. And it's really hard to say whether or not Konami would or would not do something like this because it's Konami. You don't really know what they're capable of doing. So, down in the comment section below, remember to let me know what you think about these changes to the Arata cards over in the OCG. Do you think they are good for the game? Do you think they're bad for the game? Or are you like myself and just a little indifferent on what direction Konami is going to take this? And I guess that's it for now. This is GalacticGod, out.